God really implanted in my heart, in my mind, that God has a harvest, He has fish that we know nothing about. Over 80% of our population, that's nearly 22,000 people within our city limits that do not go to church with any regularity and most likely do not have a relationship with Jesus Christ. God was calling me and my family out to do this, to plant a church within this city that we grew up in, within the midst of other churches, that there was a great harvest and a great catch that He wanted us to catch, that other people weren't catching, that other people weren't reaching, and there are lost people in Ponca City.
Kyle came to me saying he really had this need and felt this calling in his life. And I was the break. And so I was working full time, and we had just had our daughter, and she was not even a year old. And he was like, hey, I think we need to quit our jobs and we need to plant this church. And I thought, we just had a baby. How are we going to do that? And the Lord was faithful and really began changing my heart to see the vision that God really gave Kyle. From there, when we really felt like, how do we even start a church? Like, how do we start a church in a community that has 70 plus churches? And what we realized is that one church can't house 26,000 people, which is the population of Ponca City. And so we had some meetings advertising in the community saying like, hey, we want to tell you a little bit about our heart and our vision for the city. And from there, we kind of developed our launch team. So we had about 50 or 60 solid people who said, I want to be a part of what NewPoint Church is doing. In these community meetings, we were talking about when we were going to launch NewPoint Church. When is our first Sunday? And after our last community meeting, our launch team was like, why are we waiting till the fall? And so after that community meeting, we're like, I guess we'll start on Easter. And so we just pulled the trigger, really. And then April 5th, 2015, first service of NewPoint Church. And we really didn't know what it was going to be like. So we were preparing for about 100 people. And that first Sunday, Easter Sunday, we had 215 people come and a couple of salvations that first Sunday. And so in our hearts, that was an encouragement to know that the Lord was in it.
While we were at the Carolyn Renfrew Center, it was, the space was really challenging. We didn't have rooms really for anything other than one large space for kids. And we took some bookshelves and we put them in the middle of the space, and we made it into 2 rooms. So we had babies, and then we had everything else after that in that one room just for the kids. And then we had another room quite a ways away from the main area that was for our youth or older kids. And that was all we had. So we really needed more room to grow in that way, beyond just needing more space in the auditorium. We were looking for other places, but there wasn't a lot of options at the time. And so we did come look at this space, and at the time it really wasn't feasible for us. And I really just don't think it was God's timing at that point for us to have the building. And then a little bit down the line, God really brought it back up, and He was like, hey, let's go look at it again. So then we came back and looked at it again, and literally all the doors just started opening. The pieces started falling into place. And it was so sweet, because the Lord really made it clear that this was the time, this is where we were supposed to be. And He made the road really easy.
Coming in the building, it's realizing that this is going to be a lot.
It's going to be a lot of work.
A large group of, a lot of older couples. They just came in, they traveled from all over and did pretty much almost all the renovation. I mean, they dedicated their time, their effort, their skills. They had their tools, they brought trailers, and they just went to work. It was a huge need that was provided, and God provided that. I mean, it was incredible.
When we moved into the building, it really opened up the ability for funerals and weddings and things like that, whereas before we didn't have a space, of course, where we could offer those types of things to not just the community, but to our members in the church. And the Lord really made way for us to be able to expand our ministry in so many different ways beyond just the 3 hours that we were able to minister on Sunday mornings.
So the ability to have our own building and the ability to have this space, it was never really about the building, though. It was a tool. It was a provision from God to reach His people. It's all about building the relationships, providing a space for people to experience God, to experience His presence, and that's really what I think this comes down to. Is ultimately, the building was a tool to be used to the glory of God, to reach His people, to reach the people of Ponca City.
I remember when we first started that we had big faith. We bought 400 chairs and we only set up, 150 chairs in the room. And so at the back of the room, they were stacked up behind the curtains. But every single week we prayed over those chairs, that one day God would fill those chairs, that one day we would use those chairs. And since those early days in 2017, we've seen God continue to grow our church. So at NewPoint, one of the things that we say often is every number has a name, every name has a story, and every story matters to God. And we say that because we do talk about the numbers a lot, and the numbers are important, but the numbers represent actual people whose lives are being transformed by the gospel, which is the very reason why we planted NewPoint Church. And so when I think through the numbers and how things have changed over the last 10 years, it is just mind-blowing to think that God took us from a place where 13 of us met in our home to now over 700 people in service, worshiping God, serving God every single Sunday. We really are seeing a large-scale impact on our community. And one of my biggest honors was just a couple of years ago getting to baptize my daughter Madeline. When I see life change not just happen in the community, but when it happens in your family, that's something incredibly special I'll remember forever. Baptisms are one of the most special outward displays of someone's inward life change. And early on, we sought out to try to display that in a way that would be both inspirational to our people, but also a recognition of a person's decision. And so we created this life board, which is light bulbs that people write their names or initials on and put it in the light in the board, and it represents people's lives being transformed. And I remember the first time we did that, we probably put in a dozen light bulbs or so in the first few weeks of our church. And to now, we've seen over 420 people give their lives to Christ and follow through in baptism here at NewPoint Church, to the point where we filled up our first life board and we had to create a second board that spells out the word change. And that's why we do what we do. We want to see people reached with the gospel and taking next steps. I remember back to the early days of small group ministry, where we started the church in April, and over the summer and on into the fall, we sought out to try to connect with people. And we knew that we needed small groups, but we looked around and we didn't have any small group leaders. So Cheyenne and I just decided to lead 2 groups. As we multiplied the groups, I don't know if I could have ever imagined what God would do here through small groups, as we've seen our groups grow from those original 2 groups to now over 40 different small groups. But most of all, as we talk about the growth and as we talk about what God has been doing, lives are being changed. We're seeing marriages healed and restored. We're seeing families come back together. We're seeing incarcerated people find freedom and new life and second chances. We're finding people who are struggling with addiction of all kinds. They're finally finding hope and freedom and life. We're finding people who struggle with depression and who struggle with mental health find healing. We're finding all kinds of life change happen. And I believe that we're still just getting started.
My 8th grade year, I was going through a low in my life, and I was looking for solutions. And one night I was just praying, like help me. And then the very next week, I got invited by Rachel Gertkin to attend NewPoint Youth. From the moment I walked in, it was like just welcoming arms, and it was like a strong community, and I felt like I actually belonged. And then a couple weeks go by, and then we're learning about the 3 circles, and specifically the brokenness one. and I realized like I was truly broken and I was in need of a savior, because like that's the only thing that can fully heal you. NewPoint Youth, it's helped me grow not only spiritually but emotionally and socially, in being able to be more myself and be able to go talk to more people about Jesus and feel comfortable in the gospel. And as I've grown my relationship with the Lord, it's also begun to trickle into my family and affect them. And I've been bringing my family to church, and my sisters have been asking me questions, and I've been able to help them understand more about who Jesus is.
I went through some pretty devastating stages with my family for a couple years that really rocked my world. And in that season is when I decided I'm going to wake up and go to church.
It was wild. Never picked a Bible up.
NewPoint met us where we were in that moment. I remember the Sunday that we got baptized, immediately following that service, we had 2 of our friends come over and pray over us, like right there in the middle of the hallway. And we've just never felt that before. That authentic, that genuine love. And I just think that that's, you know, when you asked how NewPoint has changed our life, and it has tremendously, but it's, to your point, it's the people. It's like we are the church, and I just feel so fortunate to call this place our home. And I hope that someday we can be the church for people at that stage of life that we were at. At the very beginning, our daughter could quote scripture, and we had no idea what she was talking about. And I was on a work trip, and she slipped this note in my laptop bag, and I think it just speaks measures to the transformation that I've made and we've made as a family. And she put, "I am knowledgeable about faith, but I'm trying to live it out like you. You are my hero. Never forget that. I love you." And I just think that at the beginning of all this, I looked up to her, and I wanted to know what she knew. And now we read in the Bible together, and we discuss it, what it means.
Where we were in our marriage, it was
on the verge
of divorce.
Yep.
We did not that we didn't communicate well, we didn't communicate.
I was more so ready to walk out the door. I was done. And he was like, "No, we need to figure something out." I was like, "Well, if we figure something out, it's going to be either counseling or this class."
If it wasn't for God, this church, and love and respect, I don't know where we would be. Small groups is life-changing.
I think that class really hit home to, like, you know, every class we would go in, and it was like, oh, we just don't want to be here, whatever. And then it was like they were speaking right at us. And every time we left, it brought up good conversation. I think that was the biggest growth, is like we were finally conversing on, well, this is what I was saying, and, you know, and this is what I meant.
Learning to communicate, that was the biggest thing, the communication factor of, like she said, what did you hear me say?
And understand the other person's perspective.
Yep. I love where we're at now.
Agreed.
But that doesn't mean we're done either.
No.
We still have work to do. And it's this class isn't just teaching me how to be a better husband, but it transitions into how to be a better father, because I'm a father of 4 daughters. And so I'm showing them and teaching them what they can expect or should expect from their future husbands.
Yep.
This is how my husband should treat me.
And so, what a marriage should look like.
Absolutely.
A healthy marriage.
I take it serious.
Yeah.
Not just for me, but for my children. Because I want them to have a healthy marriage from the get-go. I don't want them to start out in that rocky surface like we did. Start out strong, start out God first, and this is what He intends for your marriage, and this is how you should treat your husband, and this is how your husband should treat you. But I absolutely love where we're at in our marriage.
Yep.
Absolutely do.